Hello, it's Amy. I'm here with the Journal of Emily Shore once again, and I've got a cup of tea at the moment. And this is one of the teas I got in a big order I put into Murchie's Tea, which is based out of British Columbia, Canada. And I absolutely love their tea. This is their black currant that I'm drinking right now. And they've all got all sorts of good stuff. There's one that, let's see, where am I going to put this cup of tea? I think I'm going to put it on the footstool beside me. But there's one that I'd ordered that is interestingly enough titled Prince Charles Blend. And I do wonder whether they're going to change the name of that tea potentially to King Charles. But keeping with the trend of British things here, we are back to November of 1836, page 169, and we are reading the entry for the 26th of November, 1836, which was a Saturday. My uncle does not know that we are reading Ivanhoe, for we have said nothing about it to him. And after he had gone away this evening, AP and I fell into conversation about it and debated the propriety of giving it up. We were all very well inclined to do it, especially A, but we did not quite decide to do so. I confess I shall find it mortifying, and I cannot agree entirely with, and there's a name omitted here, with someone's opinions, because he would entirely abolish all works of imagination. Now, why has our Maker given us imaginations if they are never to be indulged? Besides, I am sure Papa would not object, for he has occasionally read to us a novel himself, and I respect his opinion much more than, and once again we have a name omitted, or anyone else's. So that's interesting that she would be of a household where novels are seen as, indulgent and immoral in a way. And so they are, I guess, secretly, the young people are secretly reading Ivanhoe together. December 4th, Sunday. Notwithstanding that I am aware I write too much already, I have not been able to resist the temptation of beginning a comedy, denominated Breaking of Wild Colts, of which the scene and actors are in this house. The composing it is a great amusement to me. December 10th, Saturday. I should say, from all I know of Shakespeare, that his great merit lay not in sketching individual characters, but in painting human nature in general, in displaying the different passions of the mind, and tracing its progress from one state to another. This I conceive to be the merit shown in the drawing of Macbeth. I do not know that there is much individuality of character in that tyrant, or that he acts differently from what most men in his circumstances would do. But nothing can excel the talent displayed in exhibiting the effect of those circumstances on the mind of man, and the natural transition from one kind of wickedness to another. And yet there is a certain sort of individuality in this play, after all, at least as far as to show the different effects of ambition and murder on two different species of mind, on the weak and sensitive, comparatively so, I mean, of Macbeth, and on the strong, hard, and vigorous one of his wife. But as I have spoken on this subject before, I shall not enlarge upon it here. December 15th, Thursday. I feel now quite convinced that I must not exert my mind at all, compared at least with what I should like to do. I cannot read or write without a headache, and writing also gives me a pain in my chest, which I have not indeed been free from for some days. It is very painful to me deliberately to lay aside all my studies, and it seems to me that I shall sometime hence look back with great regret on the year 1836, the 17th year of my life, thus apparently wasted as far as study is concerned. Yet I ought not to entertain this feeling, for it is God's will. I always find it difficult to give way to fatigue or incapability of study, and if it was not for the reiterated lectures of all around me, I should not allow myself to be ill at all. I am told that I am not giving myself fair play. I am sorry that idleness is necessary to my doing so. A and P do not allow me to teach them as I used to do, which I exceedingly regret, as I cannot think it hurts me. December 16, Friday. I wish I had leisure to commit to paper 100th part of the tales, poems, and dramas with which my brain is crammed. I have such splendid visions in my head that the idea of never realizing them with the pen is quite mortifying. That's a really tragic thought there. I feel like we were robbed with Emily Shore. December 18th, Sunday. It was a beautiful day and there was another lovely sunset. I heard a wren singing and it struck me for the first time that his song was very like a Liber Augustin. My uncle read to us a part of Scott's essay on the Ten Commandments. Scott considers the commandments as a summary of the Christian practice, containing, when properly understood, the whole of the Christian's duty. My uncle thinks the same. I cannot help differing. I do not think the commandments have any interpretation but the literal one. Moses could not have meant them to imply more than the actual words when he delivered them to the children of Israel. A spiritual interpretation was not according to the Mosaic plan, and they were meant not for us, but for the Israelites. We may use them, if we like, as texts from which to draw lessons of morality, but we ought not to think they were intended to teach us all that a Christian should do. It does not seem to me that Christ, in his Sermon on the Mount, is explaining the commandments so much as showing the difference between the Mosaic or moral and the Christian or spiritual code, and adding his own precepts to those already in force. Everybody acknowledges that Christ introduced a far purer and stricter system of morality. But how was that the case if he taught nothing that ought to have been new to the Jews, nothing but what they should have known and understood before? For if the commandments were intended to be spiritually understood, and if, as thinks, there's a missing name here, if as missing name thinks, Christ blames the Jews for not so understanding them, it is plain that they ought and could have so understood them. It is manifest, too, that no turning, twisting, and straining of the commandments can possibly extract from them even the heads or outlines of all a Christian's duty. There is no commandment to forbid lying except with respect to our neighbor. There is no precept to inoculate humility or forbid pride or to teach the spirit of Christian charity, especially in the forgiveness of our enemies. And many things were allowed under the Jewish code, which are not allowed to Christians. December 20th, Tuesday. We finished Ivanhoe yesterday. I think it is a splendid specimen of genius. Except for the sake of that pathetic dialogue between Rowena and Rebecca, I would willingly part with the last chapter, and at all events the book should have finished when Rebecca leaves the room. Scott spoils his novels by finishing them so carefully with the future happiness of the hero and heroine. The death of the Templar is admirably conceived. To be sure, as Aunt Belle says, it was wrong of Ivanhoe to risk Rebecca's life as such a chance as his feeble and decaying strength. But then there is a moral grandeur in his confidence that heaven would grant victory to the just cause. This evening my uncle finished Henry VIII. I must say I was mightily disappointed in it. Whatever it is that I am not capable of understanding Shakespeare, and it cannot distinguish whether it is that I am not capable of understanding Shakespeare and cannot distinguish his beauties, I do not know. There is no effort in Shakespeare's works. He takes so little pains that there is interesting or noble or sublime, or finally, he takes so little pains that what is interesting or noble or sublime, or finally exhibiting the features of the mind, seems to drop from his pen by chance. One cannot help thinking that every play is executed with slovenly neglect, that he has done himself injustice, and that, if he pleased, he might have given to the world works which would throw into the shade all that he has actually written. To be sure, this gives one a very exalted idea of his intellect, for even if the mere unavoidable overflowings of his genius excel the depth of other men's minds, how magnificent must have been the fountain of that genius whose very bubbles sparkle so beautifully. But to speak of Henry VIII in particular, Henry himself, Catherine, and Wolsey, though they display a degree of character, are not half so vigorously drawn as I had expected, or as I could, methinks, have done myself. The others are in general nonentities. The character of Cranmer exists more in Henry's language about him than in his own actions. Gardiner, as far as one sees of him, is accurately represented, but in general the characters do not figure sufficiently often to be made much of. And we have a note here. It may seem strange to say so, but do not these critiques, crude and shallow, as of course they are, indicate that she herself believed that her talents could be for drama? What she sought in fiction, especially in dramatic fiction, was the exhibition of character, vigorous presentment of passion, with trust in general human nature, even to realism, and the sincere and bold portraiture of individualities. Her critical view, like those of the day, were frankly objective. She had always before her, for her standard, living human nature as she saw and understood it, and the subtler metaphysical depths escaped her. She shows this by the suggestion that his beauties, which she could not fail to perceive, seemed to drop from him by chance. And how strikingly, though unconsciously, does she thereby pay tribute to his unrivaled genius. Indeed, her suggestion that he might, if he pleased, write works far beyond what he had already done, but states the fact, for she had not read Hamlet, save as a child, nor Othello at all, which, when she did, instantly couched her hitherto dim seeming eyes. And so, once she read more Shakespeare, she did realize there were works that she appreciated more. But we're going to pause there, and when we come back tomorrow with the next reading, we will be on Christmas Day of 1836.